This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. Nothing here happened all at once. Nothing exploded. Nothing collapsed on camera. And that's exactly why it matters. Because the most dangerous failures in a democracy do not announce themselves. They arrive quietly, procedurally, legally, wrapped in language that sounds familiar enough to ignore. What you're watching right now is not chaos. It's something colder than that. It's a system being tested, not by its enemies, but by the people entrusted to operate it. Limits are being pressed, authorities are being stretched, and reactions to resistance are revealing more than the actions themselves. If you've been feeling like the ground under American governance feels less solid lately, like rules still exist but somehow don't slow things down anymore, that feeling is not accidental. Stay with me. Because once you see what's actually shifting here, you won't be able to unsee it. And to understand why this moment is different from all the others we've lived through, we have to stop looking at personalities and start looking at power itself. Power in this system is supposed to be slow, deliberate, distributed. It's designed to move only when multiple institutions agree that it should. But that is not what is controlling the system right now. What controls it is speed, the ability to act faster than oversight, faster than debate, faster than resistance can organize. Emergency language accelerates everything. It compresses timelines. It narrows choices. It reframes disagreement as danger. And once that frame is set, authority concentrates upward. Not because the law disappears, but because the law contains exceptions, and those exceptions, when invoked often enough, stop feeling exceptional. This is where the system quietly shifts. Not from democracy to dictatorship. That's too dramatic, too obvious. It shifts from shared power to tolerated power, from consent to acquiescence, from can you do this to will anyone stop you? And here's the critical point. This shift does not require public approval. It only requires institutional hesitation. Because when lawmakers hesitate, procedures fill the gap. And procedures, once activated, are very hard to reverse. That's the framework. Now we need to talk about how this didn't start suddenly and why its slow arrival made it more dangerous. There was a time when extraordinary power actually felt extraordinary. Invoking it carried weight, cost, political risk. Before a declaration like that signaled failure somewhere else in the system. A last resort, a moment everyone understood would need to be justified later. Now it barely registers. Not because it's harmless, but because repetition has dulled the response. Before, lawmakers debated first, then acted. Now, action comes first. Debate arrives after the fact, if it arrives at all. And the shift wasn't announced. It was normalized. Each time the system absorbed an exception without consequence, it taught the next decision maker a lesson. You can move faster, you can go further, and the backlash will be manageable. That's how guardrails erode. Not through a single breach, but through accumulated tolerance. And here's the danger of slow change. Fast crises provoke resistance. Slow ones train people to adapt. Institutions don't collapse when they're attacked. They weaken when they're asked to accommodate the unacceptable. Just one more time. Which brings us to the moment when adaptation finally fails and quiet discomfort turns into action. That moment didn't arrive by accident. Then the system flinched. Not publicly, not dramatically. Internally, because something crossed from abstract concern into operational risk. A concrete action moved forward that forced lawmakers to stop theorizing and start calculating. Not about politics, about consequences. What happens if this authority is actually used? Who gets pulled in? Who is obligated to respond? This wasn't about intent. It was about capability. When language turns possibility into option, the machinery responds automatically. Plans exist for options, all of them. And once those plans are activated, oversight loses time. Time is the currency here. That's why resistance appeared where it rarely does. From inside, from people who had previously tolerated the drift. They didn't agree on motive. They didn't need to. They agreed on risk. Because if the system allowed this moment to pass without friction, it wouldn't stay hypothetical much longer. This was the line, not drawn loudly, but deliberately. And the response to that line, the reaction to being slowed down, is where the real story begins. Here's how the system actually works. Authority doesn't flow in one direction. It flows where resistance is weakest. Emergency powers don't override the law. They exploit its silence. They activate pre-written permissions. They unlock dormant authorities. They move decisions out of public process and into executive control. And when that happens, the benefits concentrate. Speed benefits the center. Flexibility benefits the decision maker. Ambiguity protects the actor, not the public. The costs, meanwhile, disperse. Oversight absorbs delay. Institutions absorb blame. And the public absorbs uncertainty. This is why emergency power is so attractive under pressure. It bypasses negotiation. It reframes opposition as obstruction. It turns procedural limits into inconveniences. And here's the part that rarely gets said out loud. Once you use these tools to escape constraint, every future challenge starts to look like a reason to use them again. Not because the crisis is bigger, but because the patience for process is gone. That's the hidden mechanism. And when this mechanism is challenged, it doesn't retreat. It accelerates. The pace changes now. Decisions stack. Signals overlap. Explanations shrink. Pushback appears. And instead of slowing things down, it triggers escalation. More urgency, stronger language, wider claims. When authority is questioned, it doesn't answer. It amplifies. Crisis language crowds out detail. Detail is where accountability lives. So the system moves faster, not forward, faster. Multiple fronts, multiple justifications, each one demanding attention, none staying still long enough to resolve. And something else happens here. Internal disagreement becomes framed as threat. Process becomes portrayed as sabotage. Delay becomes disloyalty. That's when restraint starts to look like weakness. And speed starts to feel like strength. But speed has a cost. Because the faster a system moves, the fewer chances it has to correct itself. And when correction is delayed long enough, it stops being correction. It becomes damage control. And the damage doesn't announce itself yet, but it's already being passed downward. This is where it reaches you, not as theory, not as procedure, as consequence. Because when authority concentrates, the effects don't stay abstract. They land in real lives, quietly at first. You feel it as uncertainty, rules that seem to change without warning. Decisions made far away, faster than explanation can catch up. You feel it when oversight slows and answers take longer and accountability becomes harder to trace. If you're wondering why trust feels thinner lately, why institutions feel louder but less informative, this is part of it. Power that no longer expects to be questioned stops preparing to explain itself. And when that happens, you're expected to absorb the risk instead. Economic volatility, policy whiplash, commitments made, then reframed. None of it dramatic enough to protest immediately. All of it cumulative enough to matter. Pay attention here. This isn't about taking sides. It's about noticing who carries the weight when systems stop absorbing their own stress. Stay with me. Because what happens next doesn't stop at national borders. It never does. Power doesn't operate in isolation. Every move made here is observed elsewhere. Not emotionally, strategically. Allies don't react to rhetoric. They react to patterns. When commitments sound conditional, when authority appears centralized, when internal checks look uncertain, confidence erodes, and erosion spreads, markets recalibrate, partnerships hedge, diplomatic assumptions get rewritten quietly in planning rooms you never see. Because stability isn't about trust in a person, it's trust in a process. And when that process looks bypassable, other systems adapt accordingly. This is how local shifts become global signals. Not overnight, gradually. Small recalculations compound, margins tighten, buffers disappear. And the most dangerous part, no one announces this adjustment publicly. They just prepare, which means by the time consequences become visible, they're already locked in. This is no longer just about internal control. It's about how quickly uncertainty travels when the world no longer knows which rules will hold tomorrow. And once that uncertainty escapes the system that created it, pulling it back becomes almost impossible. From here, the system doesn't collapse. It chooses, not consciously. Structurally, there are three paths forward. The first is adjustment. Institutions absorb the shock. Resistance holds. Limits are reasserted, not loudly, but consistently. Authority slows. Process regains weight. This path is quiet. It requires patience, discipline, and repeated enforcement. And it only works if hesitation turns into habit. The second path is erosion. Pushback fades. Precedents remain. Exceptions become routine. Nothing dramatic breaks. The system keeps functioning just with fewer breaks. Power moves faster each time because it learned it could. This is the most common outcome and the hardest to reverse. The third path is rupture, not chaos. A snap, a moment when accumulated strain meets an external shock. Economic, military, political, something that forces decisions faster than the system can manage. At that point, rules don't disappear. They're simply too slow to matter. We don't know which path will win, and that uncertainty is the point. Because the choice isn't made once. It's made every time pressure arrives, and someone decides whether limits still apply. There's a temptation at moments like this to look for resolution, for reassurance, for a clean ending. This isn't one of those moments because nothing here has concluded. It's still moving, still accumulating. What matters now isn't outrage, it's attention. Systems don't fail because people stop caring. They fail because people stop watching closely enough to notice the shift. The danger isn't that power is exercised. It's that it becomes expected, unchecked, accelerated, and inherited. Whatever comes next will not start from zero. It will start from here. From every exception that held, from every limit that bent, from every moment when speed replaced consent. If you take anything from this, take this. Pay attention to the boring parts. The votes that don't trend, the procedures that sound technical, that's where the future gets decided. If this kind of analysis helps you see the system more clearly, stay with this work. Follow it, because the next chapter won't announce itself either. And if you're wondering whether this is the last test of the system, it isn't. It's just the one we're in right now.